Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm founder and CEO Jim West, and we got a great guest today that is not only he has a podcast that we're going to be talking about. He advises a lot of big companies on strategy and other programs that he runs, and he is also, and I believe you're an author as well, and a speaker.
Well, almost. Gonna be
Almost
there
an author.
soon.
It's going to be coming. It's soon in his roadmap because this guy's got so many things on the horizon yet to come. So obviously, our author is a title he'll be picking up hopefully in the near future. But he's a prolific speaker, speaks at a lot of conferences, events. We'll be talking about that as well. But without further ado, let me introduce George Kamide.
Hey, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So George, one of the big titles that you're rocking right now, and you've had a lot of hats you've worn in your career, but this one is what intrigued me to your profile, is you are a cybersecurity community builder. And so when we think in terms of cybersecurity, we usually think of the titles and the manager roles, executive roles like CIO, CISO, program managers, technical managers. We're always thinking about individuals, but you're talking about communities. So can you expand upon what this job title is and what your mission in life for this group?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. And I also both figuratively and literally wear many hats. But for the community aspect, I'm head of community at the CISO Society, which is a private group of security leaders that sort of grows by the day, has global reach, and the goal there was to build a place for security leaders to feel safe enough to talk about questions of program and practice that they can't do in public, right? No one's going to go on LinkedIn and say, like, I have this gap in my stack, please help me. And I think also on LinkedIn, everyone's, trying to vie for positions of thought leadership, but sometimes the CISO role can be quite lonely. And you can feel like you're just trying to invent everything from scratch again as you change roles. And that's just not really natural to how humans operate. Like we're very collaborative primates, and we've evolved to be that way. And so when you get these questions of program or practice, sometimes it can be very specific, like has anyone ever tried vendor XYZ? It can also be really process focused, something like, hey, we moved from monthly vuln scanning to continuous, and it's great for us, but our auditors hate us. How have you navigated this, right? So, and I think it would be unnatural to think that the CISO sits on high and has like their whole strategy figured out. Like everyone wants to collaborate. Everyone wants, if you've done it before, can you please give me some hints so I don't have to start from zero? But in addition to that, it's sort of the way I operate is just thinking in these larger communities. So as you can see from the mic, I also host this podcast called Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks with another George who's on the CISO side. So originally it started out as I'm on the vendor side, he's on the CISO side. And the goal there wasn't to build a quote unquote community, but we kind of did by accident in terms of building up an audience that has a respect for trying to bridge the trust between buyers and sellers. And then it sort of opened even wider into like just the basic humanity side of the technology question. Yeah, so I think that's how I think. I was an anthropologist by training, and so I really like people. I like studying people, patterns of behavior, and I think cyber can be a pretty lonely occupation, and I don't think it needs to be. I think we all would benefit from more collective information sharing and less like posturing and keeping our cards so close to the chest.
And I think you touch upon something because businesses and even individuals don't want to admit weakness and failure because weakness can be
Hmm.
perceived by competitors in a negative way. And also, people
Right.
don't want to put their dirty laundry out there. Like you said, no one's posting about their problems on LinkedIn because the first thing is going to be like, well, what are you here for? That's your job to fix these problems. And
Right.
it could be many things in the context of maybe they don't have the budget. Maybe they don't have higher fire authority for their teams to build. There's so many different things that could be in the context of each individual's. Like you said, you go to another company, you're starting from zero again because you got to figure everything out all over. But that collaboration piece you mentioned is so huge because it just made me look up I was trying to remember the exact name of the series, but it's called Demon Souls, where there's little aspects where when you die, the other players could give you advice or tips of the other ghosts of other players, and
Mm.
sometimes it could be helpful, and sometimes they could just be trolling you and just sending you down the wrong paths. But when you foster a community of trust, like you're doing with the CISO Society, I think that that's a very powerful thing to do because no one should have to start at absolute zero, really. I mean, if we can go ahead and leapfrog with just collaboration and get ahead of the curve, ahead of the game, the efficiencies that could be created, the lessons learned that we can all collaborate and share to strengthen all our businesses. Because the mindset should be together we're stronger, right? Because collectively
Yes,
we are,
absolutely.
sharing
And
knowledge.
I also think the CISO role itself is so unique. I think when you're in it and you're in cyber and you're on LinkedIn and you kind of forget, one, the discipline is quite new. Two, relative to other corporate roles, the CISO role is also quite new. And it's also just alarmingly broad, right? Like you're going to own parts of compliance, you're going to own parts of governance. Some people, there's not even a consistent reporting structure. Some are CIO, CTO, legal. Sometimes they report to a risk officer. And then also inside of that, the people who occupy that role come from many backgrounds and yet are expected to have mastery over many domains, right?
Many
So if you
domains.
came up through policy and GRC, or in some cases you're promoted from within because you've been with the company long enough and you sort of have that business acumen, but you got to catch up on the technical. And then we also have members who started out, plugs, switches, server racks, tinkering, soldering, like hardcore, engineering prowess, and they have to learn the business side of things. But like you take small, medium business, you take large enterprise, you take publicly traded CFOs, like more or less you're doing the same thing. Like the discipline has been codified over many decades. And like, sure, the scale changes and maybe reporting responsibilities change, but especially if you become publicly traded, but like largely it's understood. Whereas you have this title, quote unquote, CISO, but sometimes it's CISO and responsibility, but the title is like director of IT and security and compliance, and they just keep tacking on responsibilities. So it's all kind of Wild West out there, despite what it looks like, I think, on the surface. And yes, for that reason, collaboration is even more important.
Yes, and I think you're hitting on something where a lot of HR departments are just kind of Frankensteining the job descriptions,
Yes.
and then even once they think they have the job description, the CISO and the CISO kind of gets the dump on, like, okay, we'll just hand it over to this person or this guy, because if you're a CTO, CIO, and you're fortunate enough to have an individual CISO in your organization, you're just going to just start, dumping everything on him. It's almost like you're the deputy of all the roles of the CSO, the CIO, the CTO.
Yeah.
You're the deputy, and everybody knows the deputies do all the work. And so
Yes. Yeah.
it
It'll be like, I
becomes,
report to this person, but dotted line to this other person. And then sometimes I brief these people. Yeah, it's a
oh
lot.
yeah. So I could see it could be fast moving and just a mess really quickly, especially when you let people that are just like I said, Frankensteining job descriptions, pulling things out of the air, like, oh yeah, put it over to that role because no one wants to be accountable for something they should be accountable for or carry an equal amount of the load. We usually like to pin the tail on the donkey, and that's why a lot of CISOs have that big bullseye target on their back because when the axe has to fall, they're usually the ones that are getting axed first when things go wrong.
Well, every joke has a bit of truth in it, right? So one of the jokes is the title is Chief Incident Scapegoat Officer.
Scapegoat. That's a good one. Um, One of the statements in your bio on your LinkedIn, and I really love this, is talks about blowing up silos. So could you kind of delve into what that really means and give us some examples where you've made maybe some powerful statements and maybe have, kind of split rooms? Because anytime you try to blow up a silo, you're going to have dissenting folks. You're going to have people that, yeah, I agree with that. You're going to split rooms. So do you mind kind of talking a little bit towards that?
Yeah, it's a character flaw that I don't know how to be a small cog in a big machine. I don't know how to think in only one swim lane, as it were. I just have always been somebody, maybe that's the anthropologist. Like if I discover parts of a company, and for example, I've been working with computers since I was 7, so there's been a long time since I've coded anything, but I sort of understand the mechanics of that. And so I can talk to engineers, I can understand a roadmap, and then I can go back to a sales team, and the sales team is like, I don't just give it to me in like 3 sentences. Like, how am I going to pitch that? Right. And so I think the most successful organizations know how to create that connective tissue, that you have different talent that speaks essentially in different languages. Like you can have a Series A, Series B startup, and I promise you the sales team just thinks differently than your engineers. And they have to be able to articulate to customers, to prospects, what is the business outcome? what is that language versus here's the latest feature tour, here's the latest roadmap, this is why this particular like algorithm is important. You just have to be able to like communicate very clearly, and that requires storytelling. And storytelling is very hard once you start getting into these silos. Once you start to sort of ossify into these, you know, engineers, you stay over there, product team, you stay over there, sales team, you stay over there. That's where you start to get a lot of high friction. And I think that is also true inside of security organizations, inside of companies. Like once they are just like heads down security and they don't talk to other teams, or you get a little bit of friction that can have tremendous business impact. So, for example, a lot of security teams end up owning risk instead of managing risk, right? So, marketing goes out and takes the company credit card and gets Asana or HubSpot or some sort of like SaaS license, but they don't own any of the risk. Something goes wrong, some data leakage happens in that tooling. It's actually not the security teams. They should manage the risk. That is their job. But because they have not communicated across those silos about who owns the risk, I think that is one case where that is a silo problem. And also, you just get people kind of like infighting in ways that are really counterproductive.
Mhm.
So I think that's what I've always thought in terms of blowing up or let me think of strong statements, is that sales is public diplomacy, right? You're out there building relationships constantly. Um, Marketing and frontline sales are feedback loops, right? Like if you're a product leader and you are not talking to customer success, what's going wrong currently,
Yeah.
and you're not talking to sales, why aren't people buying? And you just are sort of like heads down in product land, like that is a huge miss. And if you can't communicate across those teams, you are not doing your company a great service, right? You're just sort of flying blind or guessing. And then frustration hits, right? Revenues not hitting targets and people start pointing fingers. And that's all because everyone was just sort of operating in their silo. And it's tricky. It's really tricky because you can't have meetings where like everyone is on,
Mhm.
because one is super expensive. And then two, I hate meetings. I understand they're
Yeah.
not really productive, but you have to like build these like I keep calling it connective tissue. You have to build ways for that information to flow inside of an organization, because I promise you the sales notes sitting in Salesforce that only the sales team is reading is probably chock full of juicy bits that the product team should be iterating on really fast. But it's whether that information flows or not. I think this is actually a great irony that security, for all of its concerns about data, has a huge data loss problem when it comes from like what does the support ticket say all the way to like product development. That information just sort of degrades over time as it
Kind of like
passes
that
through an
old school
organization.
on the playground telephone where one person says one thing, by the
Yeah,
time it gets to
absolutely.
the developers, it's something
Absolutely.
completely different. Um,
Yeah.
with with a lot of your experiences, you've worked with a lot of well-known companies like Confide. We did mention CISO Society. I'll come back to that in a minute. But another one called Mind Over Cyber. Can you talk a little bit about the work you've done with Mind Over Cyber and what they're doing?
Sure. Yeah. So Mind Over Cyber is a nonprofit dedicated to providing defenders with what we call portable and accessible mindfulness meditation techniques to manage stress and reduce burnout. It was born in 2023 out of a pretty personal experience. I had been laid off. Two of my friends were going through it. There was family illness. There was just a bunch of stress. I mean, when is there not stress? And despite the fact that the three of us talk every day, we did not know that each of us was using mindfulness to get through the year until we discovered this. And we were like, oh, well, if this is helping us, surely it will help other people. And as we kind of dove into it more, I think it's very easy to say, of course, cybersecurity is stressful. But I think what we're trying to approach it from is that stress is inevitable, but it is not inevitable that you will collapse because of it, right? And so I think for most cybersecurity teams, based on a talk I just gave, I would say the mission should be sustained excellence, not superhuman endurance. And I think it is tempting to kind of do the endurance bit because as a culture and industry, we kind of have depending on how you look at it, a martyr culture. Like only I can, you know, configure this firewall or protect this DDoS attack. Or we have a hero culture. And I think once we reckon with our human limitations, we actually we can become better defenders. And I think also because we work in front of screens all day, I got two right here, and there's another computer over there, that we take all this input in all day through our eyes, and we forget, like, I think most people aren't even aware they're stressed until they hit this breaking point, in which case they probably should have been addressing it like a few months ago. But I've seen people sort of like, hunched over computers in the airport, their jaws gritted or whatever. They probably don't know that they're not in their bodies. And so we just believe that mindfulness is a way to train people a little bit at a time. That's why we call it portable and accessible. A little bit, 30 seconds here, 2 minutes there, that you can kind of train your mind into a stronger state so that when the incident comes, because it's going to come,
Mhm.
that it doesn't just like sort of redline your mind and then you just collapse afterwards.
Well, I love that you and your two buddies were able to, work together through those tough times and share those experiences to now develop something that's going to benefit many others in the industry. So if you're feeling burnout, we're going to have the links for the Mind Over Cyber in the description below. One of the things you mentioned, though, you mentioned the having the martyr syndrome or the hero trying to play the hero. I'm going to add another one in the mix. You got this, and it's a very particular type of personality, the pariah, where they're sitting there touting all the things
Mm,
that we need to do this is broken, and they're always just the negative naysayer. And eventually you get isolated or ostracized from the group
yes,
or team because they're like, this guy's just nothing but negativity. We don't want to hear him. Now you're completely ineffective if you go to that level of negativity. And so I think having a real, like you said, controlling your mindfulness, your stress levels, and then it makes you see better because if you're hunched over that laptop and you're just
yes,
grinding away, the blinders are on and you're just kind of like a workhorse where you're only going down this one track and you can't really see to your left, your right. You can't get the broader picture. So I really love that you guys started that nonprofit and it's a benefit to all. So we'll definitely have the link for that in the description below. Another big thing that we can see replicated in all the hats you wear and your descriptions and the talks that you do, and we'll talk a little bit more about the talks you do in a second, but there's a common theme that keeps coming up again and again, and it's the word trust. So, what does trust mean to you, and why is it important?
I mean, it's such a simple question and yet such a big one. So, um, again, anthropology background, like humans are evolved to collaborate, and they will only collaborate with one another, whether it's in like the village, the tribe, whatever the denomination, the town, the city, the country, as long as there's an established trust, and that trust has to run two ways. I think we as an industry have run into some, I guess, external factors that have eroded parts of that trust. But I think people buy from people, and the holy trinity in cyber is people, process, and technology. But we really over-index on the technology part, and we kind of leave the people part aside. But nothing works either inside a security organization with its surrounding company or sales to buyer without trust. Now, this is one of the maybe the most counterintuitive things, especially since I came from the vendor side, is we all believe that our features have no parity. We're the best because you have to kind of believe in that level of zealousness to work in startup land. But from the buyer side, a lot of software is software is software is software. Like I've seen buyers pass on, I guess you could say, technically superior software because they have a better relationship with another vendor, or the experience of the buying process built more trust and they felt like their pocket was just getting picked with the other one. And so I think the more I can illuminate both sides, the better that we could have that trust. Because I think rightfully so, a lot of CISOs and security organizations don't trust or are skeptical of vendors. But I also know the flip side. I know security leaders who have bought from the same rep like literally every shop they move to. They just have so much implicit trust that they're at least willing to have those conversations. But I think sort of the heady days of what I affectionately call SaaS 2.0, which is basically post recession to 2020, so 2008 2020, when interest rates went to zero and funding just went bananas in cyber, we got into this culture of just acquire as many logos as possible, run up the valuation, IPO, sell, whatever.
Mhm.
And at the same time, we had some technical improvements on the marketing side. So then we can just automate a lot of bad behavior faster, right? So this is what has led us to this stage where you get, these automated emails, 60 emails every 3 months, or now, oh my God, these days it's like auto dialers, just like
Oh yeah.
blasting your phone repeatedly.
Hmm.
But I think that's operating in an old model. And I think I'm beginning to see signs that buyers are changing. They're younger. They've experienced the pandemic. They don't want you calling them on their cell phone. And some financial pressures are changing too. Like VCs are now looking at customer retention, not just like how many logos do you churn and burn. Because it used to be like, oh, I can afford to like alienate this user because I'm just going to go acquire 3 more logos. That's getting very expensive. And I think the market is changing, but a lot of the people in charge came from that era, so they sort of have this copy paste playbook that is kind of at a disconnect from where marketing was and sales to where it is now. And I think we're in the middle of that reckoning. And I would like to be a part of the force that kind of brings those back together and establishes that trust again.
And you said it best earlier when you talked about the whole people, technologies, and processes, and we put so much money and focus in technology, and of course our processes, right? GRC and other
Hmm.
policies, and our operations side. But we leave out the
Yeah.
people because we expect the people to show up and perform at their 100% every day. Sometimes you're at 40% one day, you're at 60% another. We're all at different percentages every day we show
Yeah.
up to work, right? But you know what I like about that is when you talk about the buyers and the sellers and how it's still people oriented, right? I do the same when I coach people on their resumes, right? Everybody thinks about, on the top of your resume, you got that big statement that everybody puts, I'm a
Yeah.
hard worker, I'm a smart, I'm genius, whatever the
Passionate.
yeah, it's a bunch of garbage for most hiring managers, but they look for, okay, what is the checkbox? I need someone with a bachelor's with this many years experience and maybe a couple of certifications, credentials. But once they get past that, if let's say 100 plus resumes come in and they check those three primary boxes they're looking for, how does the person come through in like an interview or get selected even for the interview? And what I recommend folks, and George, you may laugh at this, but I tell them, I said, add two sections that most people don't. One is awards and recognitions because everybody, if you've been a good performer in your company, you've either been
Mm,
recognized, even if
mm,
it's just a employee appreciation or employee of the month or whatever. List those things in the year you got it because they can correlate your work history to it. Oh, he was a top performer. He must have really did do these things that he says he did in his bullets because he was acknowledged this year and a couple years ago and so forth. They'll see a pattern of high performance, right? So I tell them to awards and recognitions. And then the last section I have people do, and this is where the human element comes in. And a lot of people don't understand it at first until they apply it and they start getting asked about it in interviews. It's called hobbies and interests. Because at the end of the day, it's all based upon a feeling. Like if I'm interviewing, let's say, 50 people out of 100 resumes, and I'm going to call after call, most of my interrogative type questions are going to get kind of the same answers, right? But is it really the person
mm.
that can answer questions best? Maybe they just got done with a bunch of training, a bunch of research, and they got it fresh in their brains. But I have a great quality person that would be a great benefit to my team and my organization, but they're not at their A game that day. Maybe they come into the interview at 40%, right? Because of work and stress. I don't know all that context, but if I could get to talking about something that they're passionate about, they're interested in. So let's say a typical hobby and interest would be just traveling, but you list your top favorite destinations. And let's say someone lists Tokyo, Japan.
Mm.
And let's say I've never been as a hiring manager. That gives us something that's besides the job to talk about where we can connect as human beings with a
Yes.
discussion of, I've always wanted to go to Tokyo. How is it there? Now we're connecting on a different level that's not related to the work. But what this works out for people is whatever that hobby and interest that ends up becoming a talking point in the interview, at some point they're going to go, we'll get back to you in a few days. We got other candidates to interview, right? But when they come back to those list of names, they're going to remember, oh, George is the guy that
Yes.
his favorite destination is
100%.
Tokyo. We had a wonderful conversation. He was telling me about some neat tips and tricks if I ever go. I like that guy because what did you do? You demonstrated you had a mastery of something, you had an experience you shared, and you was sharing it, sharing knowledge. And that makes people feel good like this is a guy that's a good fit for our team because it wasn't about the
Yeah,
interrogate
you have to be memorable, right? You got to
memorable.
find ways to
Thank
be
you. You're
memorable.
selling
And
yourself,
I
right?
think, yeah, and I think from the So yes, from the interviewee, you are trying to be memorable. From the interviewer, the things that I care the most about are you curious and a self-starter? If I got to check in with you every day to tell you like this, that, the other, do this, do th if I have to do your prioritization for you, it's highly problematic. But if I put you in a situation and you come back a week later and you're like, I noticed we do it this way. Do you mind if I try it a different way because I think it'll be faster? I'm like, hell yes, like bring that energy, right? Because that's why
Yes.
you're getting hired. And so I think, yes, any opportunities you can discover curiosity because I have tried, Lord, I have tried. It is hard to train curiosity. You kind of either have that or you don't. I think most people in cyber do. One of the best job descriptions I have seen recently, shout out to this member of the CISO Society, was for a senior pen tester. And the must haves were things like demonstrates clear communication, demonstrates curiosity, maintains a home lab, writes a technical blog. Like basically like what are the things that show me like you're in it to win it? The
Yes.
nice to haves were the things like the OSCP and the
Hmm.
certs and stuff, and that was like less important. I was like, that is amazing.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of JDs out there that just feel like they were written by an insane person, but I think, yes, that's what you're trying to get out. You're trying to discover. And I would say it's the same thing when you have conversations at a conference. Like, how can you just be a human being who's like interesting to be around and not like either try to pitch me on something immediately or, I told you I'm not a buyer and yet you're still scanning my badge. That just tells me you don't care,
Yeah.
like you don't really value me.
Checking the
You're just
boxes
gonna
at that
like treat
point,
me as
right?
like a number in a lead sheet. So I think yes, we can get back to that.
Yeah, I think again, getting back to like you said,
Oh, sorry. My one of my favorite questions to ask, and feel free to steal it,
yes.
is at the close of the interview. Tell me what tabs are open in your browser right now.
Ooh, tabs open in your browser. Okay, that it can
Because
also
I,
be
I mean, I
dangerous.
got yeah, everyone has tabs that is like, for days. And sometimes it's like white papers that I keep telling myself I'm going to come back and read in my fanciful free time.
Mhm.
Or it's, Champions League soccer highlights that I'm going to get to at lunch, but it's going to tell me something about you.
Yeah.
But if it's just like it's all spreadsheets, like maybe we have a problem here. So I don't know.
All right. So one more thing I want to talk about before we go to the agenda questions is that the you have a podcast. So it's called the Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks podcast. Did I get that right?
Yes. Yep.
So can you tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about the why have that podcast and some of the subjects and topics you've talked about? Just
Yeah, so I met my co-host, a CISO named George, because I invited him to an
wait,
event that
his
we were
name is
hosting
George
at
as
Black
well?
Hat.
Two
Yes, so
Georges.
it's George from the vendor side, George from the buyer side, and that's how
Love
I
it.
pitched it to him because we both were kind of over the song and dance that we call it, and I thought if we just acknowledge the dance, then we kind of rip the awkward band-aid off, and then we just have a real conversation. And then we did, and I pitched him. I was like, "Look, you're George on that side, I'm on George on this side. Like this thing sells itself." So we launched it very much to just have a way to vent. It does come with an explicit rating because we do curse quite a bit, but it has grown into something that has become sort of the most rewarding part of my professional career, which is just an opportunity to have lots of different conversations from both sides. And it has expanded. That aperture widened from sales and marketing into very much the human side of cyber. So, yes, we cover things like new ideas around selling, new ideas around marketing. We talk to founders about failures. We talk to practitioners about their stresses, about their worries, what are their preoccupations. Yeah, it's been very rewarding. And last year we won Podcast of the Year from the Sands Difference Maker Awards, and that was very, very, very surprising and unexpected.
Well
And yeah, it has
deserved.
just grown into something that's been a lot of fun.
Well, again, well deserved. And hey, what's better than one George? You got two Georges. So wonderful. And we're going to have the link to
That's
that
right.
podcast, all the links that he has that where the podcast can be listened to and streamed on in the description below. So you don't have to do the Google search. The links are right there for you. So just pause this video and check it out. So if you're ready, we're going to move into some of my favorite question that I like to ask all
Let's
my
do
guests.
it.
So if we can go back to now, you mentioned that you started off in anthropology, but if we could go back to day one when you said, "Hey, I want to steer myself towards IT and the cyber industry into that general direction," What's that story of that day one, if you could share that with us?
Oh, good question. So, if you had asked me a long time ago whether I wanted a career in technology, I probably would have said no. Again, despite tinkering for years, my parents, we immigrated from Brazil, didn't have a lot of money. They paid probably through the nose for a 386, and then they paid a government contractor to teach me like basic when I was like 7.
All right.
Um, and so, but I never really wanted to work with tech. It was just something I was proficient in.
Mhm.
I happened to get out of a Master's of Fine Arts program in creative writing. And back in 2013, they would pay you to write sentences, and now you can just GPT it, I
Yeah.
guess. But I was working for a global marketing agency, and a lot of my clients were regulated B2B, so financial services, healthcare, insurance, stuff like that. And this was right when brands were discovering like how to use social media in a way that wasn't just like a billboard.
Mhm.
So I was developing that, pounding my head against the wall, didn't really enjoy that. And then it just so happened that there was a startup nearby that was working on mitigating threats in social media. And that sort of felt like a lateral move.
Mhm.
And then once I stepped over to run the marketing over there, that was sort of kicked off the love of startup life, like the love of building, the love of not being the tiny cog in the gigantic global
Have
marketing
more of an
agency.
impact. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also just more fun to build things than just like do the same thing over and over again. Um, and then again, I think cybersecurity is very rewarding as an industry if you are curious. So I just kept asking questions. I would attend product sessions and just kept picking at it. And that's sort of how I got into cyber, as it were. It was through a side door. But I will tell you now, after hundreds of interviews, I've not met maybe one or two people that has the sort of traditional path into cyber, which I believe just doesn't exist. Like
No.
everyone I've talked to was like, I
There's
was a
so many
psychology
ways in.
major, or they just did something and they kind of either fell into it because the circumstances of their job changed and someone needed to like write a policy about something, or they just tinkered on the side. And it's remarkable. Some CISOs, I think, that have a very exalted reputation on LinkedIn, if you talk to them, they're like, "Oh yeah, I had no idea I would be in cyber. Like, I was just doing this thing and it was paying the bills for law school, and then I figured out like, oh, I shouldn't go to law school. I'll just do this thing with computers because it was new at the time, right? Now I think the career journey is very different, right? Like cybersecurity degree programs like didn't exist, not but like 8 years ago. It was still very new. And now like that is a thing that you can pursue as a student, which I have some feelings about, but
Yeah.
yeah,
My
and it's an
favorite
interesting
story of all the
evolution.
people I've come across, I was at a conference in Houston, Texas years ago, and a woman was sharing her story how she did like, I think 20, 25 years as an Army nurse, retired out the
Mm,
military, but she didn't want to do nursing anymore. So she just said, well, I'm retired, but I'm still young. I still want to wake up and have some purpose to wake up. So she said, I'll just get into cybersecurity. And her first year was a bit of a struggle because she did all the labs, all the training. She got like two or three
yeah.
certs. But then everybody would see her resume and be like, well, why don't you just work? Houston's a big medical hub, if you will, with all the
Yes.
hospitals and so forth. So everybody's like, why don't you just go work in there? She's like, I don't want to do that. This is my choice now. And I love that she stuck it out and went through all of that adversity of just constantly keep doing the interviews. And she finally got her in. And I like that people can come from any other career. Like you said, you did a lateral move.
Yes.
Some
Yeah.
people come in from the bottom, from the top. Some people just say, "Hey, I got tired of wearing a suit and tie, being stressed out, and hey, I'd rather just wear a polo and khakis." I love all the stories, and you're absolutely right. There's so many different stories. That's why I love that question.
But I think you bring up a good point is we suffer our own failure of imagination,
Mhm.
right? And I have heard CISOs tell me their best SOC analyst was a classics history major. What does somebody who studies Greek and Latin plays do but search for meaning in patterns in a very obscure text, right? And so I think we really have to be open to new ideas. And I think the best teams are made up of people who are not just boot camp script kiddies. Like they bring something new. I would argue a nurse also, if they're standing up as an analyst and trying to give a report, or they're trying to talk to another part of the organization about like why, I bet their EQ is through the roof. Right? That person has like an immense talent set that if you were just looking on paper, like you should do this and not that, like you're really missing
Missing.
out. Like
Yeah.
a lot of security orgs could benefit from very empathic communicators, you know.
Yes.
That's a tremendous value set.
Yeah. So along your career, and I know you still got miles and miles to go, but the reason why I like this question, it gives an opportunity to kind of shine a light on the names of those that have either mentored, coach, leaders in your, or just people in the industry that you looked up to, said, "Hey, this guy's level 99. I wish I could be half as smart as him one day, or be like that person." Is there folks that within your career so far that you would just say, "Hey, I like to just say this person was really influential and impactful for me in a positive way, and helped me become the me that I am today."
Yeah, I mean, shout out to my former boss, Lisa Hayashi. I learned a lot from her about you get talented people and then you just give them a lot of slack in the leash and let them run and do cool stuff together. I think that was a good learning curve, and you don't sort of like try to micromanage them. That's going to squeeze the fire out of people real quickly. My co-host George does that very much with his security team. It's brilliant to see in terms of he considers himself like the coach of a high performance team, right? You recruit the talent and you give them the goals and the space to just excel,
Yes.
and you don't get in their way. And I really admire that too.
Awesome. What has been, I guess, a great challenge or fear that you've had to overcome in your career to this point? Or is there something currently
I
that's challenging you or
yeah
that you
I
are intimidated by?
yeah, I think it's probably the same for most everyone in this industry, which is imposter syndrome. I try to make it very clear I'm not a technical operator. So I'm not gonna like try and one up you in that discussion. Again, it's been a long time since I've coded anything, so I'm not gonna fight you there. And the first time I got a speaking gig, I was incredibly intimidated, and I was like, "What do I have to offer this industry?" And it was when I came around to the idea that I have this anthropological lens that is not very common. And I was like, oh, I have had these conversations. I have learned in ways that are different, and that's okay. And I'm just going to own that space for myself.
Excellent. If someone, so I want to do the speed round of questions, and it's just for fun and
Do it.
levity. We've talked a lot of, emotional intelligence. We talked about trust and the human factors. So these are just purely for fun. So just whatever the first answer you think of when I ask a question,
All right, let's
right or wrong
do it.
answer. All right. Cake or pie?
Pie.
What kind of
Berry
pie?
pie specifically.
Which
Berry
pie?
pie. Cherry pie, berry pie.
A berry
Not
cherry
really
pie.
into,
A hot
yeah,
or cold
yeah.
pie?
Hot.
Hot pie. Oh goodness, my brain just drew a blank. Star Wars or Star Trek? This one splits the IT folks down the middle. So,
I know. So here's the thing, Jim. I want to live in the world of Star Trek, and I fear we're living in the world of Star Wars.
okay.
But in terms of the storytelling that I go towards, maybe it's the samurai blood in my ancestry. It's going to be Star Wars.
Star Wars. Okay. Who's your favorite character in Star Wars or favorite Star Wars character?
Oh, Yoda, clearly.
Yoda. Okay. Wise Yoda. Love it. What has been your most favorite book of all time that you've read, and what is the last book you've read?
Ooh, wow. Okay. Most recent book was This Strange Eventful History by Claire Massoud. It is extraordinary. Multi-generational epic, which I love, and just the language is scintillating. One of the favorite books I read that I keep coming back to is a book called Range by David Epstein, and he looks at generalists versus specialists. And I think what he does is he blows up this myth that people like specialize early and they just do this one thing and they're like excellent and that's why they succeed at it. When he looks at the history and how neuroscience works, it's actually people who um, go really broad and then later develop a passion and expertise. They bring a lot more to the table. I feel like we are at that cusp in cybersecurity. I know this is not a fast answer, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Hmm?
Um, Think about entry level roles, junior analyst, GRC analyst, cybersecurity analyst, SOC analyst. you know what does analysis very well? Machine learning. Like that's what it does, right? At orders of magnitude faster. And so I firmly believe that cyber moves from this paradigm of analysis to one of orchestration, one where you have to have a general understanding of the business and the strategy and where it's going, that you can say, okay, I got this data from this machine. I need you to send it to that machine so you can do X, Y, and Z. You can update the firewall against this. You can use this telemetry from the EDR. Like we are going to become conductors
Yes, just like
rather
Mickey
than sort
Mouse
of
in
heads down.
Fantasia, where he's making the brooms do this and the pots and things move around the room. Well, like an
Yes.
orchestra, the maestro of an orchestra conducting all the sections and the LLMs and etc. I love that analogy there.
Yeah. So my fear is that entry level people are specializing too quickly. You know, that they are
Yeah,
just
I
they
could
chase
concur
all
with
the
that.
certs down one path, and they will become very vulnerable
Yes.
to the in the workforce.
Yes, I know. So, last question in this series is of questions is a hot dog a sandwich? That was the one I couldn't think of earlier.
Ah, oh,
Is a hot
sandwich.
dog a sandwich?
There's more possibilities in a sandwich. There's more possibilities in a sandwich.
So it's a sandwich.
It is the sandwich.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. There's no right or wrong answer there. I know a lot of us with our demanding, busy lives. You're a podcaster. You're soon to be author. Sometime in the hopefully in the near future. You're a prolific speaker. You speak at a lot of events. With that being said, actually, can you tell us a little bit about you was just at RSA conference? Could you talk a little bit about that? And is that available online for people to watch?
Yeah, so I did a talk with my friend and colleague Carol Ann Jacobs on allyship when it comes to diversity and cybersecurity, and yes, that is now recently available. It was fun to put that talk together, and it was a good room of people, and a very important topic that is important to me as I have a daughter, and I would like to see things different in this industry, should she choose to enter it. But in terms of other talks, yeah, I think talks are very gratifying to me because it gives me time and space to think through things that are just banging around up there. And it gives me room to coalesce those thoughts and share them and ideally get feedback from the audience as well.
Awesome. I like that you brought up that you had a daughter. I was a single parent for two daughters for 17 years until they moved out on to college, and that's where a lot of this white is on me. I'm
Oh
only
yeah, yeah. This was all black until the kids came, and then
so
it
I'm
was
only
lost.
47, but I look at least 10, 15 years older than what I am because of all the stress of being a single parent. Um, the A lot of us make time. I mean, we're really busy with our demanding careers, and you got so much going on. You have podcasts. You're just working all over the place, and I know you're really good at spinning all those plates. But a lot of us do still make time to work for causes, charities, nonprofits, volunteer work that's near and dear to our hearts. And whether it's something that you give of your time, energy, or money, or that you actively support in efforts, is there any projects of that nature, the nonprofit, volunteer, charity, that you want to shine a light on, who they are, what they do? And again, that's what we're here to do is shine a light on these things that are doing good in the world.
I mean, yes, for myself, it's definitely Mind Over Cyber, but we have a lot of partners that we have worked with in terms of the podcast also. I would shout out the work of Black Girls Hack, especially having built a conference out of nothing
Yes, I
during
saw them in
to help with
Atlanta
summer
at the
camp.
Hacker Halted last year. Wonderful organization. I love it.
Yes, and also shout out to Cyber Savvy Kids, which is trying to increase digital literacy for children, and which is I also think just as important for parents,
Mhm.
and also the Women's Society of
I've also had
Cybertips
Ben
as
on
well.
the
So
podcast recently. Phenomenal man, doing some
yeah,
great work into the world. I love everything he's doing with savvy cyber kids. So thank you for
yeah.
bringing that up as well. And folks, I'll have the links to all those organizations in the description below. So save yourself the Google search. The links are down below. Thank you for sharing all that with us as well. We're kind of getting to the wrap up here, and I like to give all my guests the final word. So again, whatever you'd like to speak on or talk about, the floor is yours.
Oh wow. I have so many soapboxes to stand on, and I only have strong opinions, but I will try to keep it brief, which is that at the end of the day, we're all human. Sellers are trying to feed their families. CISOs are trying to feed their families, right? And I think if we come with that understanding that we can do a little bit more if we just take the time to create the conditions for authentic interaction. That can mean how you approach someone after a handshake, how you approach someone at a conference, even how you approach someone in email. But just, I think, a little bit more patience and compassion would go a long way. And in the end, we all get richer through that. You know, there's no cost to kindness. And so that's where I would like us to start.
Excellent. Well, George, thank you for giving of your time today for the podcast today. I know you're a busy man and we want to respect your time. And folks, all the links, even the books he mentioned, there being the links will be in the description below. Check all this stuff out. Check out Mind Over Cyber. If you're in any stress or anxiety in your job and every day you're just begrudgingly getting in your commute and just hating going into work, check out Mind Over Cyber. It could do wonders for you because again, we all need to have a little bit of more mindfulness and a little bit more emotional intelligence. We all could use some reminders from time to time. So check out the that, and then is CISO Society something that people can join and participate?
Yes, I mean you have to apply to join, but we say CISOs in title or responsibility. So I know in mid-market shops sometimes the title is different, but if you own the security program and you have faced what I like to call the bidirectional heat, you have faced the heat down in the trenches and the heat of managing up through the board, then you are very welcome, and you can apply to join, and we'll make sure you get in there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. Your insights and perspectives are tremendously valued, and we're looking forward to the eventual book that's on the horizon in your
Yes.
career. So, thank you again,
Thanks
George
for the
Kamide,
time.
everyone.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.